They go into Rafah. I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks. But I've made it clear to Bibi and the War Cabinet, they're not going to get our support if, in fact, they go in these population centers.
A stern warning from President Biden to Israel. The remarks came as the U.S. paused the delivery of over 3,000 bombs to Israel. The White House is concerned over the damage that they would do to the city of Rafah. Israel's finance minister responding to Biden saying, quote, "We simply have no choice as this war is an existential one, and anything other than complete victory will put the existence of the Jewish state in danger." Annmarie Hordern joins me now from Washington. Annmarie, I look at this statement from the Israeli side. I look at the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, saying at Congress testimony yesterday, there have been too many casualties in this battle space. Here we are with an escalation from rhetoric and pulling back on some bombs that the United States were going to deliver yesterday. So this is a shift, the gravity of the shift from the White House. Good morning.
Good morning, Madison. I spoke to Ed Mills earlier this morning from Raymond James, and he was talking about the fact that this is as close to a red line as Biden has been. One of his most vocal warnings on Israel in this interview yesterday evening. When we were talking about this yesterday, we really were talking about a pause and that no decision had been made at the White House. But then following this interview, it does look like that pause is almost definitive when it comes to whether or not these bombs would be going to Israel. Biden has been concerned, and he talked about this, about the civilians that have been killed, Palestinian civilians that have been killed in Gaza. And what is so concerning to the administration, of course, is how densely packed Rafah is with more than 1 million Palestinians there. There's also, of course, which we talked to Ed Mills about as well this morning, and he pointed to the fact that we are 6 months out from the U.S. presidential election in November, and there's been a tremendous amount of domestic political pressure, especially from the youth. We've seen this across the country at college campuses, on this administration to take more of a defiant tone when it comes to the Netanyahu government. We should also note, Manis, that yes, this is potentially a fracture in the relationship, but we have been here before in the past. There is historical context for this. It is rare to see this kind of break, but it's not unprecedented. We saw it with Obama. We saw it with Reagan, with Nixon, with H.W. Bush. And that is where this relationship is right now. But Biden, this warning was very clear yesterday. Israel will not be getting those bombs.
How much of this pressure, Annmarie, is because of the college campuses? You go back to the apartheid era, which is where that level of social unrest in youth, protests against apartheid, was brought to bear by divesting from South Africa. Many people are drawing comparisons with that for Biden. He's under pressure. We're running up to this election. The youth are important. To what extent is the domestic imagery pressuring Biden to exert more force on Bibi?
Well, I think there's just really a divide with some members of the Democratic Party, especially when you look at the progressive left. A lot of that is the youth vote, but also even outside the youth vote, even some concerns with Democratic senators, as well as clearly with a lot of some congressmen and women on the Democratic side that want to see more restraint when it comes to Netanyahu and how they are going after Hamas in Gaza. So there's been a lot of political pressure within Biden's own party, which is why this has been so challenging. Because in that same interview, he talked about how it is important to secure Israel, how it's important to make sure that they have the Iron Dome. He's talked about his ironclad support to Israel, but at the same time, he's also talking about not sending them some of the ammunition that the Israelis say they would need. And we haven't heard from Netanyahu directly, but I think members of the War Cabinet have made very clear their displeasure with this. This is the tricky line Biden is walking, and until this is resolved in Gaza, this is going to be the tricky line Biden will be walking until November, Manis.
Indeed. Annmarie, how would you describe the nuances? There's been daily, sometimes over a series of weeks, conversations between Bibi and Biden. A lot of people question the ability of this administration to exert real force. They say if somebody else was in the White House, it may be a different scenario. Does that narrative hold? And to what extent is America still got the ear of Netanyahu? Or is that power and that influence seriously waning? And that's what's being said internationally rather than domestically.
I think what you see is that there's been a growing divide, especially since October 7th, when we saw this terrorist attack by Hamas in Israel. Biden flew to Israel, embraced Netanyahu. They were talking almost daily, then weekly. And now those conversations, even though there recently was one between Netanyahu and Biden, those conversations have become a little bit more sparse. What we do see, though, is that Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, is still in the region. And something the U.S. is trying to exert and trying to potentially even maybe use what's happening with this weapons suspension is they would like to see a ceasefire negotiation come to fruition. And at the moment, they are still committed to that when you have the head of the CIA remaining in the region to try to work this out. He met with Netanyahu, Ron Dermer, and other Israeli officials yesterday, and I believe today he'll be in Cairo to continue those negotiations.